Hello, and welcome to the CIO's Crystal Ball 2023 Strategy for Hybrid Work. This is going to be a great panel discussion covering foresights to realize business ambitions and maximize returns in the year ahead. Today's webinar is sponsored by Cloudflare and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, we do have a few housekeeping details that will help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in our webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that come in. That Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio or slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know in the Q&A and we'll work with you to get things up and running. Second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources, and I'd especially like to call your attention to 4 PDFs from Cloudflare. There's a pair of solutions briefs, a SaaS protection white paper, and a case study. Great resources in there. Please check them out. You can also find in there a link to the Gorilla Guide Book Club, where you can get access to Actual Tech Media's great printed resources on technology topics, as well as a link to the ATM Event Center, which has our calendar of upcoming events. So I encourage you to access those resources now and share them with your friends and colleagues. Third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $300 Visa gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for that prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in your handout section as well. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. Finally, one of the best benefits of this event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters. So to help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize. That's another Visa gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. At the end of the event, we'll look at all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. And with that, let's get to today's fantastic content. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to our 3 panelists from Cloudflare today. We have Adi Mukadam, who is Product Marketing Director, and he'll be guiding the discussion today. And we also have Cloudflare CIO, Juan Rodriguez, and Cloudflare Field CTO, John Engates. So Adi, John, Juan, welcome. Thanks for joining us here today.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks for having us.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you guys coming on. Adi, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Scott. Hello, everyone. Today we are talking about hybrid work, but before we do that, let's step back a bit. Did you all know that the word hybrid has been known in English since 1601, but rarely used before 1850? I did not know that. It literally means best of both worlds. In 1954, scientists coupled large digital computers with analog machines, so some portion of work can be done by analog, while other by digital. As you reflect on this from an IT perspective, the purpose of most hybrids is to learn how to adjust to the new landscape that brings in new opportunities. More importantly, it helps leaders to better understand the right time to leap into these newer technologies. Today, we will be talking about hybrid work, the challenges, its business impact, recommendations, and why hybrid work is the key foundation for the 2023 strategy to realize your business ambitions. Let's jump right in. And it's a pleasure to be with John and Juan. So before further delay, let's get into what is hybrid work. So Juan, maybe start with you. Is it same as remote work? Because I've been doing remote work on and off for past 10 years, but what is hybrid work now?
Yeah, thanks, Adi, and very glad to be here today. So certainly hybrid is not the same as remote, right? Now, so I was reflecting on this, and the thing that you said about like this word of hybrid has been, around for a long time, and people have been doing remote work and all that stuff. I think that when we look back before the pandemic and all these things, is like companies in general were focus on, there was like two buckets of cultures, right? Is like you were like an in-office culture, or you were like a remote culture, right? And for instance, Cloudflare, when I joined before the pandemic, was a very in-office culture. And the processes that companies had, and how we hire people, how we manage people, how teams worked, and all those different incantations in processes, they were like normally very optimized for that particular culture, whether remote or whether in office. And then the opposite, if this was an in-office culture and you were like, for instance, a remote worker, that was tolerated, right? And you had to almost like tag along and do your best working, in a different setting that wasn't entirely the culture. And certainly your experience wasn't optimized for that. I mean, in many cases, you talk with IT on the business like, well, it is what it is, right? Our things are basically focused on how we roll for like 95% of employees, right? And I think, the change in hybrid means that it is recognized now that, the vast majority of companies, or at least in the US and things like that, is not one or the other, but it's basically together, right? We have teams and we hire people that, where they're going to have like, certain a portion of the people, at some point in time in the office, and some point in time remote, and they're not exclusive, and an employee can be situational. And the idea is that processes, tools, culture, how you manage, how you keep that team productive, you try to optimize for that, right? For that hybrid experience, and you align with that, right? Onboarding people remotely, training people remotely, or in the office, right? If that is the case, I think that's like the main change of what happened before, before the pandemic, again, and in this in office or remote cultures, and tolerated from now being, the recognition that basically both things are together. And I joined Cloudflare before the pandemic, but my friend Juan is a person that joined Cloudflare in this hybrid world, so maybe he can give his perspective on that.
Yeah, thanks, Juan. Thank you. Yeah, so I definitely was hired at Cloudflare during the pandemic, and at that point, it was mostly remote work because most people were sent home at the initial stages of the pandemic. Prior to Cloudflare, I worked very much at one of those companies that had an on-premises culture. They wanted everybody under one roof. They wanted people to show up to the office. Then I worked at another company where I was truly remote and felt very disconnected. The company was not designed for remote work. They were and Adi and I worked together coincidentally at a company before this, and I was remote, and I had to fly to the office every once in a while just to reconnect with people. It wasn't something that was easy, so I had to sort of over-rotate toward trying to make myself present physically, and that was hard. The pandemic sort of forced everyone to embrace initially remote work, or potentially remote/hybrid. But now that we've come sort of past the stages of the pandemic where everyone's home, people are starting to show back up to work. People are starting to do multiple days in the office. And that puts us in this situation that Juan described, where we're sort of between, sort of the full on-site and then the full remote. And that's what hybrid is. Like Adi said, the best of both worlds. You're trying to take advantage and capture the best of both worlds. And people did embrace the remote work. Some people got more productive during the pandemic because they were focused. They went home, they were isolated, they worked, sort of nonstop without disruptions, and they were more productive. On the other hand, there were some people who missed the interactions, the water cooler, as they call it, right? These chance interactions in the hallways, and we missed that. And so what I think during the pandemic, people were exploring mechanisms and ways of working that were enabling of this hybrid work that would bring back some of the things that were missing, give the employees flexibility, give them the benefit of working when they want to work, where they want to work, day, time, location. Certainly, some of these cost savings to the company, cost savings to the employee, reducing travel. There's a lot of ups and downs to this. I guess we'll get into that as well, but I don't want to steal the thunder here. But ultimately, it's just a new way of working. I think the way that we've worked has changed forever. Hybrid is probably the model that we can attach ourselves to going forward. And then what we need to do is set our companies up to be productive in whatever form that hybrid work looks like going forward.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Juan and John. That makes sense. And everything that you said, right, is also, one of the research that I was reading says 74% of the US companies are using or plan to implement a permanent hybrid work model. So it's the new normal. It's evident, right? Like post-pandemic, hybrid work is the new normal, and IT and security needs to be user-centric. It cannot be something which is not user-centric, right? So along with, if you think about it, as you see on the left, the hybrid work, the users are working from anywhere, but we have the same thing happen many years back with the applications, which are also moving out of the legacy data centers outside, right? So where cloud is no longer a tactical reaction to save money, but a business enabler. So now applications are in public cloud, private cloud, SaaS from a hybrid fashion, or some companies are using multiple public clouds from a multi-cloud perspective. So what happens when this hybrid work and hybrid multi-cloud collides? Now we are seeing any users anywhere with any device, any connectivity wants to access any applications anywhere. How do you really do that, right? How do you protect the users? How do you protect the apps? How do you provide this application access? And at the same time, as you know, it's not a green field. There are legacy environments in there as well. So we have to also think about it from a network, security, identity, endpoint, orchestration, analytics, where all of this has to work together. I've seen companies where they had to put a band-aid solution just to support this, but this is eventually going to fail, right? So we do see a lot of challenges when the two hybrid world collides, not because of the two worlds are colliding, but how the existing environments are set up. So you want to add any perspective around, that when the two worlds are colliding and the challenges that you see?
Yeah, I can chime up a little bit in there, and I think back to my point of of that in office or of office culture that happened before, right? Most of the time, I mean the experience of this tooling and systems basically was optimized for that, right? So if you were an office culture and you come to that more traditional model of having data centers or applications deployed on premise and things like that, the performance and experience basically of that was optimized around the access from those offices locations, right? And the remote access was you said a little bit of a bolt-on, right? I think that with this hybrid situation where like you are trying to optimize for both things, I mean, the ability for IT to be able to provide a good experience, accessing systems, regardless of where like people are working from, changes variably, right? And be able to monitor performance, the experience of those users, et cetera, et cetera. And at the same time with that, you need to have like different tooling, different way to measure things depending on where like applications may reside and users may reside. And that increases tremendously the complexity that you may have from an IT landscape point of view, right? And you may have different, as I said, consoles or tooling to monitor things that are on premise versus in this cloud or that cloud, right? And I think that with that, when you get into security, you may have very different, user management policies and access policies, depending on cloud applications, depending on on-premise applications, and roles, permissions, firewall policies, et cetera. And again, all these things increase complexity from an IT perspective, and risk also that you may be missing something, or you may have like a corner not particularly well covered. So I think it is for me, the experience side of things that you try to provide these users regardless of where they're working from, and these teams, and at the same time, how do you keep at bay all the complexity and risk that potentially may have with all this distributed IT landscape, different security tooling, different policies that you have to manage, user permissions and things like that in this hybrid world. So it can get pretty tricky to maintain both things at the same time. What do you think, John?
Well, as you're talking, I'm thinking about back to my history in this industry and what the drivers were of cloud and SaaS. Initially, people did sort of look at it as a way to maybe save some money, or a way to reduce your spend on data center or whatever. But we've had alternatives to on-premises data center forever, co-location, whatnot. That was another place to put your applications. This is not another place to put your application. This is a different way to run and build and deliver applications. This is a better way in many ways that increases velocity for companies. It helps them innovate faster. We all remember the era of these major systems upgrades when we had to, upgrade our IT systems, and a failure would cost millions of dollars. It would take years to get these systems upgraded or migrated, and we've sort of abandoned that for a more modern approach. And SaaS has sort of represented that, where we embrace these as a service delivery model for software. But that is, while we've improved in some ways, we've created new gaps. We've created new blind spots. We've created new challenges. Like when we embrace a new tool or a new SaaS product or platform, it's not consistent with all the rest. We lack, sort of the consistency of how we integrate with them, how we manage them, the visibility, the logging that we get out of these different tools might be different. The way we enforce security might be different amongst these different platforms. That's hard to manage sometimes, because you want the user experience from your employee perspective to see it sort of be seamless. You want their, as I mentioned before, I joined Cloudflare during this era of hybrid work. I didn't know the systems. I needed a way to make all of the systems discoverable within the organization. I needed a way to understand what tools I needed to use on a daily basis. I needed a dashboard to sort of bring those things forward and make my life a little easier in terms of discovering, what lived and where did it live and how do I log into it. And so ultimately the things that reduce the complexity on the end user and reduce the differences between applications and make the integration and interoperability better and reduce the blind spots for the IT organization. All those things make a better outcome for the business, right? We want to make it, less risky, and we want to go even faster if we can, do more with less. We want to make the IT administrator's job simpler. So all of those things are things that we're looking for when we look for strategies and solutions as the backdrop to all this hybrid work. Is that kind of on the same wavelength as you're thinking, Adi? I see you're nodding your head. Having any comments on that?
Yeah, no, I think so. That is good to understand, right? Like what you're seeing out there. That is something I agree. And also, as we are seeing, right, where this is not a green field, it's not flip off a switch. So there has to be some existing legacy environments, newer technologies. How do you integrate that? How is the CIOs are concerned about not just going after the new shiny object as we understand, but once it's implemented, will it interoperate, right? Can we have consistency from a policy management? And the challenge with the silo team, it's not about they don't work together, but security has their own projects. Network team has their own projects from SD-WAN, identity. But as you start thinking about it, there are 60, 70 tools that you have to enforce this simple application access. Now, in this two hybrid world, what you're really doing is providing application access based on all these different parameters, but it has to work together. So having this central, I think so, visibility and being able to have that a single portal becomes important. And also to your point, about the consistency, right? Users working at home, then they go to office, they say my home network is faster sometimes. Why? It's because of all these complexities, right? So no, definitely that resonates.
Yeah, my best example of that is probably when you think back to the way we used to work. When you were working remotely, which for me was temporary, it was always sort of like when I was traveling or maybe when I had to log in from home or something, I would use the VPN, right? The VPN was the way I would bridge from wherever I was back into the trusted corporate network, right? But today, these applications, they live out there in the cloud. They're oftentimes accessed over the internet, almost always accessed over the internet nowadays. The users, I'm sitting here connected at home from the internet, right? I'm not on a trusted LAN or a WAN. I'm on a home network, and tomorrow I might be at a coffee shop or something. I mean, I think that's reflective of a lot of our daily lives, and what we see is the need to sort of protect the connectivity, the user experience, the privacy. The company needs to protect all of its assets from end to end. It needs to protect the users from the threats that might compromise the user or the user's device and then make their way into the organization. They need to wrap the security around the application. These are APIs that live in various clouds. These are web endpoints that live in various clouds. And again, every one of them is slightly different. But yet, the company is really in a position to have to protect all of that from end to end and make that experience seamless to the end user, make that experience feel like it's very coherent and it's all one system and nothing, is disjointed. I mean, Juan, you work on that every day at this organization.
Yeah, and I think one of the things they were saying about that very much illustrates, that topic about remote tolerating versus actually true hybrid optimization is, the example that you put about you may have some applications in the cloud and you have your connection that you're in from home or working, while you're traveling. In a more traditional model, what will have happened, more front office culture is, to protect, the access, you will have something on your computer that tunnels you basically to the office. And then, you will exit through one of the office's data centers. So to go to a cloud application, you will still be going through your office network and then back outside. And the experience is terrible, right? I mean, from a performance point of view, the experience for the end user is horrendous. But, again, that's more of the remote tolerant approach before. While now, what you have to deploy basically in that employee computer when you're working in hybrid, it's be able to access that cloud application, with a very fast experience, from where you are. But at the same time, without that VPN or anything like that, be able to check for the security policies, make sure that that access is filtered correctly, that identities checked with a centralized identity management system, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, there's a lot of things that as a CIO, a security team, you gotta think about on how do you truly make that a joined up experience, in that and a good performing experience, in the hybrid world.
Yeah, that old VPN experience really doesn't apply anymore in the modern world because the applications aren't on premises anymore. They're outside, right? And if you've got all of your remote users trying to tunnel in through a central VPN concentrator or firewall of some sort, the other problem is that device becomes a target, right? If you are funneling everybody through a central VPN device, what do the attackers decide to attack? They attack the choke point or the bottleneck or the thing that everybody relies on, right? And we did see that in the beginning of, Cloudflare is a company that protects from DDoS attacks, and a lot of VPNs were attacked at the outset of the pandemic because it was a way to take a company down or hold them ransom until they decided to pay up. And there's got to be better ways to do that, and there are. That's the good news, is there are a lot of great alternatives to that legacy VPN.
Yep. No, that makes sense, right? And to your point about some of these challenges that we discussed are unforeseen, but some of them are to companies known, right? But unresolved. But what that really means for the business, if you think about it, is there are challenges. End of the day, I think so. I'm sure Juan, you and a lot of other CIOs agree. The last thing that a CIO wants to hear is IT is a business blocker, right? So as you see all these unforeseen challenges, can you give some perspective around the business impact? Because as you see it, it is going to decline user productivity. All the symptoms that you see, which are unforeseen, or the challenges, the symptoms below, is going to really impact the business, right? Because now cybersecurity is no longer a technical gap. It's a business challenge, right? Not just a technical challenge. So any perspective on this, the impact of these challenges?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that the problems in this hybrid world, I mean, are very, very key, right? I mean, we talk about some examples of how, if you don't get this right, for me, as a CEO, I always focus a lot, like basically, like how are we able to provide like a very good employee experience, and and to me that means like I have a saying that I always say: it doesn't matter how functional, how robust, and all that stuff. If it's not fast, employees are going to hate it, right? Regardless of how functional it is. So, be able to provide like basically fast access to resources is always very key. And if you don't do that, that is going to lead. Obviously, I think that the productivity part of things is obviously something very visible. But I think that what happens over time, and you mentioned it in here, is this aspect of talent retention, right? People get fatigued about like fighting with systems or access, or be able to having to fire up the VPN every time that they have to access things, or I cannot do that from my phone because I don't have the VPN on my phone. I gotta get on my laptop, and my laptop is on my bag, and I'm having dinner with somebody, and all those sort of things. And from in a market where talent has plenty of choices of where they can work, being able to provide an excellent experience is key for talent retention, right? I mean, if you take a look at the typical, I haven't been in a company where like you do the yearly employee survey and people say like, our tools are amazing. We don't need any more tools, right? It's always, one of those topics that around, access, more tooling, better tooling to help me productive, and together with that is is in the hybrid world is we talked a little bit about the ability to make these things a consistent experience from an integration perspective, single identity management access points, to all these applications, regardless of what it is. I mean, users have to remember like 27 million passwords, for all the different applications, different clouds. And at the same time, together with that also, it's basically, make sure that you have like some kind of, as an IT and security organization, a central way to basically monitor these things holistically, right? With log aggregation, SIEM tools, security monitoring tools, access policies, et cetera, et cetera. So that's some of the things that I will mention in here. What else comes to mind to you, John?
Well, I think about some of the things you're talking about. I think about the trade-offs that we've always historically had to make for the user. The user wants to get their job done. They want to do it fast. They don't want a lot of roadblocks in their way. And so oftentimes they would look for the most efficient, most convenient route. And at the other end of the spectrum, you had security folks, sometimes IT folks, but primarily security folks saying, we need a more secure route. We need a better lockdown. We need to issue this corporate laptop that doesn't have any kind of administrator access. We need to apply all the patches on a regular basis, make sure it's up to date, put all the right tools on it, lock it down, right, and control it. And the users were always looking for ways around that because they wanted to put the latest software plugin in their browser, or they wanted to do, so that sort of trade-off has always been around. And what I think we're finally seeing in this era where the tools are getting better, the SaaS tools are starting to enable this maybe is the halfway between those two extremes, the ability to sort of leverage tools that do make it easy on the end user, but also give some control and visibility and sort of awareness to the IT and security folks. We need to be able to attract top talent, not just retain the talent we have, but also attract the new ones, right? And so a lot of times the way you do that is by having your users, your current company users or employees tell their friends about what the experience is like. You want your best advocates out there saying it's so much better to work here because we've embraced this model, or we've made it easy for the employees. We don't have to do that clunky VPN login and use that app that is required to have on every machine. We can do it so simple. I just log in, I open my laptop, and I'm online. So you need to be more competitive when you think about the user experience. You need to engage your employees, not just on the sort of interview and inbound kind of process, but also meetings and collaboration. You need to make those things engaging inside the company. You need to make a culture that is set up for hybrid. And all of that has its pluses and minuses, things that sometimes we know are going to be great, and other times they're things that catch us off guard. When we start to implement some of this stuff, again, we're back to that lack of consistency because we're using 5 different SaaS tools from 5 different vendors. They don't all integrate. They don't all interoperate well. Sometimes we have good logging in one tool and sometimes we don't. So again, we're looking for ways to bring these things together and bring back some of the coherence and manageability to this for the IT organization.
Yeah, I through a story, I was thinking about it. I have a relative. He's retired now, but he worked in military intelligence for many, many years. He's a retired U.S. Marine Colonel, and he worked in intelligence. And he always used to tell me, when I was at work when I was significantly younger, and he always used to say again back into his intelligence was Juan, security is painful, and if it's not painful, it's not secure. And if you if you think about what it used to be, John, and what you were saying about VPNs and all that kind of stuff, it was true. I mean, to deliver basically good security, it was really painful, for the user, terrible. And I am glad that, a lot of the things that we've been able to do in this hybrid world, we have moved from that. We're we can have our cake and eat it too, right? We can deliver great security for the company and for users and things like that. But at the same time, be able to provide a great employee experience, accessing all those resources in a secure manner. So,
you're talking about security, and it's reminding me of sort of the approach that a lot of companies find themselves. They have a security breach of some sort. Most oftentimes, security breaches, they start with an email, a phishing email. That's the number one way that a breach begins. And the phishing email compromises a user, and the attacker makes their way in and starts to move laterally across the network. And The VPN allows for that, so you have to figure out a better way than the VPN. But you also have to figure out a way to protect those users, and then get the users invested in your security. Not have security be at odds with the user, but have the user sort of be an extension of the security organization. And the only way to do that is to give them a great experience that is a secure experience. Give them a way to protect the company proactively, give them a way to not be penalized for clicking the wrong email or opening the wrong link or something like that. But actually, in our company, for example, we've sort of incentivized people to report things, and even if you accidentally click the wrong thing, you're not punished for it. You're sort of celebrated for doing the right thing, so to speak. And so building the right culture takes you from this adversarial perspective to something. And I think that's not obvious. It's not always obvious that you need to change the culture to sort of embrace some of these things, rather than just continually feel like they're a thorn in your side and battle them. Like if you took the approach your friend said, we'd lock everybody in a dark room and turn off the network and make them work in isolation, and that's secure, but it's not very productive, right? And so we really have to think, how do we go the other direction and rotate toward user productivity, but with security in mind?
It's funny you say that, because I saw something on social media saying, in case of cyber attack, pull all the cables out, right?
Yeah. So, unplug the network.
Unplug the network. And Juan, what you said about your relative that was about the security, it's been known security is often compromised for ease of use. So what happens if you think about it now is someone is using on VPN, one of the apps is not working, the user turns off the VPN. Oh, one of the app is working now. But guess what happens because of that in some companies, because they're so dependent on this VPN, now the IT doesn't have any visibility into the devices and what's happening on those devices. So it's so interlinked that the dependency, it's surprising and fascinating that even today in this new world, we are so dependent on the VPN, because during pandemic, VPN pretty much, hey, let's add more applications and expose that to the VPN. It does not work that way, right? So, which actually brings us to the main topic about, I would say, bring the crystal ball out, right? So what are some of the strategy 2023 strategy foresights, as we talked about these challenges, but how can some of these companies who are in the journey of hybrid, or maybe for them, hybrid work is, we are working on it. We have some people going to office someday, but then why is that important? And can you add more perspective on what are some of the 5-6 things that you would tell our viewers today on why hybrid work is important and how to go about it?
Yeah, I mean, as we mentioned, fighting the tide basically is like a losing proposition, right? I think John mentioned is that, and I think you added that, how for the vast majority of companies basically implementing, a hybrid strategy and a hybrid culture, is key. And as I said, at the end of the day, people are going to go to companies basically where that is possible, versus basically being locked in a particular model. So, I think that in an environment that we have, which is like almost like a war for talent, that is absolutely key if you want to continue to attract key people, right? So, what we have, I think, here is like some of the things that people can think about is unleashing the hero, and how do we empower users, through some of the things that we were saying, right? You can give people security training, and I think that that's very important and a requirement, and something that we do like a ton of that in Cloudflare. But also, it shouldn't be something that, as you mentioned, is like where people feel like fear about things, right? That they make a mistake and they're not gonna, they're gonna feel like ashamed of reporting in and things like that. So providing an environment and tooling, to so you complement both things, right? And from a cultural perspective, I think that is very, very important. Being able to provide like fast access to applications and not funnel things, through the company environment, like before that, through these choke points that is going to create like a terrible user experience, right? Protecting the environment, is more complicated than it was before. That endpoint that the user has, and even like the home network of the user, becomes your company's edge, right? I mean, you don't have like a castle and moat approach like before. So how to think about, tooling and having visibility, on those endpoint devices at any, all the time, right? But, without being tremendously intrusive, that still lets like users be able to do what they need to do, without them feeling that their productivity is getting their productivity is getting affected. The other thing that that I think that is very important, just like from an IT perspective, and just like thinking about from an IT environment, is like you have all these very distributed IT environment, right? In my previous company, for instance, I have services that I had to manage, in multiple public cloud environments, plus SaaS applications, plus on-premise applications, distributed in many countries around the world. But you got to think about is basically how you, even with that distributed environment, how do you invest on certain tooling that can still provide you centralized view and centralized management around access policies, identity management, visibility, et cetera, versus like, each one of those being a little bit of a one-off, because you will die, I mean, from an IT management and cost perspective. And there will be more instances, it's like a recipe for a breach, as John mentioned before. So I think that is also incredibly important to think about, from a tooling perspective, how to be effective in that highly distributed world. John, what other things are in there that you can think of?
Well, I think when I look at some of these priorities, we are definitely trying to improve the experience for the user, as you mentioned. The crown jewels I think of as the data on the one end, where the data lives. I think of the user at the other end, and we want that to be end to end, and we want that to be a great experience no matter where they are. So we really have to take security all the way out to the edge, right near the user. We have to make that experience as performant and pristine as possible for that end user. We need to also embrace, when we think about this omnipresent, idea, it's not just our users, our employees, it goes beyond that. We're integrating today with more applications. We're leveraging APIs from other organizations. We have customers that are using some of this very same applications that our employees are using, just from the web side of things, right? So it's beyond just user and application. We have to think even more holistically about all of this. We need to make, throughout the conversation, we've talked a lot about the complexity of managing all of this for the support folks, the administrators, the people that make this happen every day. We can't fatigue them either. They're keeping the lights on, so to speak, and we can't let the folks behind the scenes, we can't let them down by making their job, inordinately hard or difficult. We need to streamline that, make it simple, and then ultimately look at the big picture. Like, are we leveraging too many tools? Do we have too many point solutions? Do we have a legacy of applications that there's a lot of overlap? I find in conversations all the time, when companies start to do a little bit of an audit, they find that They've got overlap amongst IT tools, sometimes between multiple SaaS products. Maybe one vendor has added some new functionality and they've abandoned another app and they just don't even realize it. And so sometimes companies are looking backward into their legacy architecture and realizing a lot of savings from just some integration of better tools or modern tools, and finding that they can do without and save a lot of money in the process.
Yeah. So that's actually a good point, right? So what you're saying is, when we say reappraise, is pretty much like appraising a house. Look at what's the value right now, right? Not yesterday, or a couple of years back. So what we are doing is, what you're saying is pretty much look at what's not relevant today, cut cost if you want to, optimize where it's necessary for better experiences, and maybe invest from a business value perspective, because that's something that's so important, right? How can you reinvest some savings back into IT, right? That also, I'm sure, becomes important. One of the things I wanted to ask you is about this omnipresent operations, because the more and more companies are thinking about from an omnipresent. So what I hear is, it's not just about the employees and the users. You're talking about the customers, the end customers, who are also engaging with the companies and in real time. Look at the banking sector, look at manufacturing, right, where they're trying to understand preferences of the customers, right? Because it's different and different. So by creating this omnipresent operations, you're actually tackling the employee part of it, but also the user part of it, right? Not the user, the customer part of it. Anything you want to add there?
Well,
Yeah,
I
think
think
that.
a great. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Juan. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that I think both of them go a little bit together, right? I mean, the expectations, obviously, of customers, to have, access and to services all the time, every time. And when they have when they have issues or a problem or some questions or some performance challenge or, connecting to an application, things like that they're able to get like some kind of response, right? In many cases, a lot of those things can be delivered like automatically, some of those responses through chatbots, AI tooling, and things like that, but sometimes that requires a human, to basically take a look at those problems and have alerting and things like that. In this hybrid world, if your customers are working, have those expectations on a 24/7 perspective, you need to be able to also enable your teams, to be able to respond to customers, on a 24/7 basis, where like they are, have access to take a look at the problems that the customers are going to have at this time. So I think they go both together, right? Those customers' expectations with you then, having to provide a lot of the things that we talked about the employee access, regardless of where they are, where they may be working from at any given point in time. I'm sorry, John.
No, it's all right. I was actually, as you were speaking, thinking of a different way to explain it. But in some ways, the enterprise today, using so many SaaS tools, was driven by the user experience on the web. We saw so many companies 5-10 years ago hearing from their employees, why do our internal systems not work as well as, let's say, Google or Facebook? Why is my internal system so slow and so clunky, and yet these consumer tools are so good? And then we rotated internally to bring that experience up, again with the SaaS tools, and embraced a lot of that. Now we're again rotating back around to make sure that the external experience is just as good and just as secure, because ultimately we're all hybrid, right? I mean, our users, sometimes they shop online. I mean, our customers, I should say, sometimes they shop online, then they're shopping in the store, then they're having something shipped to a relative who wants to return it to the store. And there's so many different interactions that we need to enable, and that's they call that omni-channel. But I think about that as just one element of this sort of omni present approach to things, because our administrators, our users, our internal customers, our external customers, they should all have a world-class, top-notch experience.
Yep. No, that makes sense, right? And I'm sure, right, all these topics are so important and the key building blocks, if you think about it, for a successful hybrid work, pretty much. So to summarize, right? So what you just said, right? Very insightful, by the way. So we have to look at it from unleash, excuse me, the user, unleash the hero in the user from a productivity perspective. Have them the tools. Don't let them go to the tools. Bring the tools to them. It's not a judgment call for the users. It's about it's there. They know it. It's there, right? So, and some of the technologies like zero trust. Email security and RBI is important. And how can you reduce the cybersecurity risk and improve posture is really looking at it end to end. And from an omni-channel global operations, you need to not just build an architecture, but it has to be global, right? Because that's the thing. The user in one part of the world and you have suppliers in other part of the world, they need to have the same experience at the same time. So this model has to scale globally from a security, performance, and reliability. And lastly, as you're trying to do that, it should not complicate it for IT, for a fatigue. And last, look at it from optimized cost, right? So in interest of time, I'm going to move to this last slide here on we know Cloudflare partners with so many large companies, helping them in their digital transformation journey. We also know we help a lot of customers in terms of this hybrid workforce and protecting. So can you probably summarize it for our viewers in terms of how Cloudflare can help or in these areas?
Should I take that, Adi? Yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so when I think about the history of Cloudflare, we were really protecting web applications and things that existed on the web. But I think we've gone so far beyond that. We've leveraged this network that we have globally. Adi just mentioned how important it is. We have 275 data centers around the world, and each one of those runs a set of services, all the services, in fact, that enable a lot of the things that we've been talking about today. So SASE in the center there, that's Secure Access Service Edge. That's the ability to bring users onto your secure network, get them to the applications across the internet, wherever those applications exist. That's a model for enforcing zero trust security right near the edge and making sure that all the security services are very close to the end user, ensuring performance. Scaling applications, that's what Cloudflare does best, helping scale applications and the security that goes along with it, making sure that we can accelerate applications and apply things like DDoS mitigation that we talked about, protecting attack that might happen against all kinds of infrastructure or bots. We're also faced as we enter the holiday season. There's a lot of bots that might take advantage of websites and web applications. And so Cloudflare spends a lot of time thinking about that, protecting those, crown jewels, so to speak, right? Where the revenue gets made. And then, in the pink or purple box there, it's the developer services. Adi talked about omnipresent, omni-channel, we need to do this everywhere around the world. And these developer services allow us to push our applications right to the edge and deploy them everywhere, again, where the users are. We are literally within 50 milliseconds of 95% of the internet population around the world. So we are very close to the end users, the population centers. Our network is very well connected with over 11,000 peering arrangements and interconnects and an aggregate bandwidth upwards of 155 terabits per second, which allows us to do amazing things across this network. We can absorb attacks, we can accelerate traffic. We work with the largest cloud providers and SaaS providers on earth, and we can bring your users the security they need and the connectivity they need across that network to any location. So I'll stop there, and maybe if I've missed anything, you guys can chime in.
No, not at all. Juan, anything you want to add?
No, what just to add that I tend to be customer zero for most of these things.
You are.
And most of the time, a lot of these services, basically, we try them in Cloudflare with our own employees and our IT teams during beta periods and before we make them available to customers. So, we have a processing cover called like dog fooding, where we it's supposed to be like we eat our own dog food, or some of the companies, it's like drink our own champagne, right? So. The vast majority of all these things are deployed on Cloudflare. I'm always more than happy to talk with customers or people that may be interested on how we run these things in Cloudflare.
This solution saved us from a very high-profile attack recently, an SMS phishing attack that somebody targeted Cloudflare and then dozens of other companies, and we were the only one that successfully defended against that attack, and it was primarily because of this platform, the Zero Trust platform, the fact that we enforce a high degree of security with hardware keys, some other key factors, including the culture of the company that I mentioned earlier, the security forward posture of the company. And I think that's something to be modeled for a lot of organizations that find themselves in this hybrid world, is how do we protect the organization and the user from phishing attacks, from malware, from DDoS, from ransomware. These kinds of attacks are very real, and they're very high profile when they happen, and they cost a tremendous amount of money. And that's really what we're using, again, to protect our own company. But now we've taken a lot of those capabilities and turned them into enterprise products and services that any company can embrace very easily.
Yep. Yeah, no, thank you. That's very helpful, I'm sure, for a lot of our viewers who want to know. One thing I would add is also the partner ecosystem. As John and Juan mentioned, we have the SASE, the application developer, but we also have partner ecosystem, which helps us from, we have endpoint protection and management, identity and access management. We get all the signals from different endpoints and help from an identity. But at the same time, when we have the users coming to the platform, or once they are on the platform, taking them to the applications, we have these on-ramps, right, which are very optimal as well. So in a nutshell, right, Cloudflare really helps to protect the users, protect the applications, and provide this dynamic access, which is very fast using our platform here, right? So I would say, as we heard so far, like moving to the cloud is no longer enough. The ways in which people work, communicate, collaborate has not only changed, but has been significantly disrupted. So we need to find ways to connect these dots, unleash the hero, like Juan and John said, to expedite innovation while ensuring cyber risks are in control. And Cloudflare has those platforms for the transformation that many organizations use. So please reach out to us, right? We'll be happy to talk more, share more perspectives, and see how we can help. Scott, probably back to you for any Q&As if we have time left.
Okay, yeah, great discussion. I'll just note from the audience that Marco appreciated your factoid, Adi, at the beginning about the origin of the term hybrid. And Paul really appreciates his perspective from the C-level about strategizing for hybrid work. So we probably just got time for one question. And this one here resonates with what you guys have been talking about, keying on that idea that you guys mentioned of omnipresence. So they're saying most organizations have some form of remote work option. And the question is, how are omnipresent operations and hybrid work different from or similar to remote work? So I'll just kind of throw that out there and see if anybody wants to take it.
Yeah.
John, you want me to try to take
please.
that one?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, well, look, I think obviously in both instances, we want to provide that secure remote access so that teams really can operate as if they were in the office, but without exposing the business to threats, and making sure that we can make a great experience for the teams, making them feel like they're working side by side, but even in vastly different locations around the world. Remote is certainly a part of this omnipresent, or hybrid is part of the omnipresent. But again, back to what we were talking about a little earlier, it was really taking into account the full scope of the ecosystem, the end-to-end approach, whether it be APIs that we need to integrate into, or applications that we want to build that serve users all around the world. We need to take into account the the customer, so to speak. And so it's not just about remote or hybrid work, but it's a comprehensive approach to make for a productive experience for your customers, and applying this model in a very sort of cohesive way everywhere, and making the performance really work well for everyone anywhere they happen to be on the planet.
Okay. Well, I could listen to you three on this topic all day. Gazing into your crystal balls. This has been fantastic, but unfortunately, we're about out of time. So,
Okay.
Adi, Juan, John, thank you so much for this great discussion and for all these insights. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Well, we have come to the point in the presentation where we do the prize drawing. So I'm going to announce the winner of the $300 Visa gift card prize. And the winner today is Paul Cooper from Texas. So congratulations to Paul. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Cloudflare for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for your great questions. There are a lot of questions we couldn't get to. We'll be sure to get all those to the Cloudflare team so they can get back to you. But that concludes today's event. Have a great rest of your day.